Hello, it's Brother Juro, YouTube philosopher, and I'm going to make this last video as far as dealing with counting the obvious cost. And it's at a point where I had a discussion with my sister, and she basically was saying that now that she's older, she doesn't need a man, and it's just not necessary for her to be in a relationship with someone. But later on down the road, we'll have a conversation where she's lamenting. I mean, she's really like, I don't want to be by myself, and I'm basically just saying, okay, well, you know what, let's just take a moment to see and understand what to me should have been just obvious to you and obvious to every woman that walks the face of this earth. Now, what I'm going to say is, if something is good to do as a young woman, it should be good to do as an older woman. And if something is embarrassing to an older woman looking back at her life, then that should be something for a younger woman to pay attention to and to avoid doing. And because it's going to be embarrassing later on down the road, it really should not be something that you would necessarily want to do. And if it turns out to be something, let's say you imagine yourself to become a mother, would you want your daughter being involved in doing these things that you're now embarrassed, to mention to people? Now, for me, I'm saying that for a woman to live on this earth, there's just some things that she has no influence to change. She doesn't have any influence to change the fact that her peak years of making children are within the ages of, I think I'm willing to guess, between, say, 14 and 25. That's something that arguably no one, no matter what philosophical view they have in life, is going to influence to change. You can't say, oh, I'm going to have a baby at 60. I'm going to taste life. I'm going to enjoy things. And when I hit 60, I think I'll be at a state of maturity where I'm going to have a baby. This is likely an impossibility. And for a woman to contemplate that, they would call that woman a fool. But to me, there are what I call degrees of foolishness that we just don't want to admit to or acknowledge. And this is the question that I have. If you're going to say that you're not ready to settle down and have a family because you want to have a career, you want to have fun, I'm going to ask the question, what's wrong with inverting these desires that you have to have children first, and have children while being committed to one man, and be committed to raising those children? And by the time your child reaches the age of adulthood, let's just say 21, between the ages of 21 and say 25, then it should be at a point where once you've satisfied this family obligation, that if it turns out you feel like you haven't tasted and experienced life, that you want to have a career, that you have time on your hands to do that. You have time on your hands to separate from your husband, separate from these children that are now grown, to go off and live this selfish, narcissistic kind of life. But obviously, you see and understand that it's just not as attractive to contemplate life in those terms. But to me, after you've had these children and they're grown and they're gone, you really probably wouldn't even want to go off and have a career. You probably wouldn't want to go off and live this debaucherous life of promiscuity. But the trade-off would be, or the situation would be at a point where you would say to yourself, here it is, I'm a mother that has raised her children. I've honored my commitment to my husband. But I don't really see myself as being as youthful and energetic. And I don't see myself as being attractive or interesting to other men as I did back when I was in my prime years raising and giving these kids. I've sacrificed my youthful years to accomplish having a family. So now what do? What, you're going to do something that is going to cause you to lose the respect of your husband, the respect of your children, because it's a selfish thing. I think it becomes more difficult for you to make such a dumb decision. But here it is, because your prime years of having children are in your youth, you're going to have to do that first. And then if you want to live this wretched and debaucherous life, then you can do that. But I'm really just trying to understand how women don't really think about these things in the reverse, as opposed to doing what they do. Because if, like for my example, my sister, she lived this self-indulgent life. She tasted life, to the extreme degree of getting strung out on drugs. She had children, but she wasn't responsible for them. I had to take care of these kids and raise them. But now that she's older, she's gotten herself together, been sober for well over 10 years, and is holding a job and a church-going woman. But, she's lonely, she's regretting, and now she's not even open to consider how me, her brother, can teach her how to be a woman that will attract a God-fearing man. We spend more conversations, and we're both so-called Christians, arguing to where we just can't reach a conclusion. But I'm pointing out to her that, look, I'm a member of your family, and you talk to me to the point of yelling and screaming and arguing. Now, if this is your idea of how to conduct yourself in a context of being a part of a family, how in the world can you expect a man to want to involve himself in becoming a part of your family? To me, honor and respect, it goes across the board in family. And I point out that here it is, you don't have a problem honoring and talking to your boss, never losing your cool and going berserk on him. And the reason why is because he's not going to tolerate such conduct. And you know that he has the ability to make you pay by cutting you off and firing you from, being an employee working at his company. And to me, this is the one thing that, to me, women as well as men, I'm not just going to beat up on the women, we seem to just take for granted that family, Family doesn't have any choice. You got to deal with family. And I'm like, no, that's not true. Because the Bible shows how God, he loved the Hebrew Israelites, and he told them, look, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to do all these wonderful things for you so long as you remember that I'm a member of your family. But the day that you forget is the day that terrible calamity is going to befall you. And to me, this is what I see happening, that women, on one hand, are not paying attention to what it means to be honoring and honorable, and men are being drawn away by a lot of women that are, for lack of a better way of putting it, acting like whores. And they're really not even whores, because they're giving up their bodies just for the sheer sake of pleasure. They don't receive any compensation. I mean, there was a situation where there was a woman that I knew, and she had a husband. And during the time that they were married, she cheated on her husband. And she cheated on her husband with a guy that was a good friend to the husband. Now, the terrible thing about that relationship was that the friend to the guy, he didn't even offer to take the girl out on a date. He basically got her phone number, made a couple of flirtatious phone calls, and one day he called her, asked her what was she doing, and she said nothing. So he says, hey, why don't you come over to my house and spend some time with me? So she gets in her car, drives over to the guy's house, and has sex with the guy, takes a shower at his house, and proceeds to return back to home. And I'm listening to the story, and I'm like shocked. I said, wow, that's amazing that, I said, the guy didn't even spend a quarter to even take you out on a date. And you give him your body. You let him have what by right is supposed to be exclusively belonging to the husband. For nothing. I mean, literally nothing. But she had the nerve to return home, and I asked her, I said, what motivated you to return home? When you recounted the story to me, you were saying that the guy gave you what your husband couldn't give you because he wasn't there for you. What made you return home? And she said, well, I returned home because I knew my husband cared. So if she returned home because she knew her husband cared, she is admitting that the other person didn't give a damn about her. He didn't care about her. So why would you gravitate and give someone who doesn't care about you so much? This is something that I just marvel at, because to me this is just a typical story that I hear so many times, and most of the time women don't even understand until somebody takes the time to listen and hear the story, to point these things out. So with this, I really hope that this episode would get women to think clearly, and ultimately get a blessing, because you guys are giving up so much in your youth, to where by the time you get to where your beauty is gone, nobody wants to have anything to do with you. And you're going to be just stuck with cats, parakeets, and dogs as companions, when here it is, all you had to do was just think a moment and not be so dumb, not be so self-centered and narcissistic to think that there won't come a day that your beauty will be stripped from you, and you won't have anything, you won't even have an honorable history for a man to look upon, to contemplate seriously taking you on as a mate in your latter years. So with that, I depart. Peace to you all.